So now we're going to have Raymond Lotta, who is a political economist, a writer for Revolution newspaper, revcom.us, and who's also on the staff of Revolution Books, come to speak. And we're going to ask him some questions about the new synthesis of communism and how will this be something that could solve this problem, as well as some other questions. So we'd like to invite you, Raymond. All right, thank you for coming. So this is our first question. Okay, in our statement, we argue that capitalism is a straitjacket on humanity's chance to save the planet. So how will a socialist society and economy function to be able to address this environmental emergency?
First of all, I want to thank you for inviting me to speak and to be part of this very important discussion that's taking place. In response to your question, I think that I want to emphasize what you said earlier, which is that humanity does have two choices. Either we live with this horrific system, and that means allowing this planet to hurtle towards environmental destruction and all of what that means for the very prospect of life on this planet. Or we make revolution to put an end to all the horrors of this system and to create a society and economy and move towards a world community of humanity in which we can truly protect, repair, and become caretakers of this planet. Now, you mentioned in the question the matter of how is this a straitjacket? And I think it's important to first understand that it's a straitjacket in two senses. One, the capitalist imperialist system operates according to certain dictates. It's production for profit and more profit. It's the competitive compulsion to produce for more profit, because if any given capitalist or block of capitalists don't expand their market share, then they go under. If General Motors were to announce today, in the name of protecting the environment, we're not going to build new factories in China so there will be less pollution, well, goodbye to General Motors, because Toyota or Volkswagen will move in and displace them, or vice versa, if Toyota were to say such a thing. That's the nature of the beast. And for them, for these capitalists, for this system which is governed by profit, look, profit is its motivation, its measure, its regulator, it's all profit and more profit, and there's a political military system that enforces that. And it's really sort of interesting if you just look at fossil fuels versus renewables. In the period since 2009, the price of renewables has come down. Solar power has come down 80%. And yet since 2000, the use of coal has increased 80%. Think about that. The market is not rewarding, green innovation, because oil and fossil fuels are so vital and foundational to the profitable and strategic functioning of this system. Profitable, the oil companies, the auto companies, the whole network of global production, and strategic. The military, you mentioned that the U.S. military is the single largest institutional consumer of oil, and also control over oil production and oil pipelines and oil transit routes. The Middle East, for instance, provides a chokehold by which these imperialists can control the world economy and the lives of billions. So, thinking about that, the dictates of this system, and the fact that those who rule this system have a stranglehold. This is the other aspect of what it means to be a straitjacket. They have a stranglehold on the resources, the knowledge, the technology that has been produced by millions, hundreds of millions, and billions on this planet. And yet none of that can be put to the use of the betterment of humanity and the protection of the planet. That's why we need a revolution, to break that stranglehold, to break that straitjacket. And day one, we overthrow these capitalist imperialists, we defeat their military, machinery, and we go to work on creating a new society and economy. Day one, there will be no CIA, there will be no FBI, there will be no General Motors, there will be no ExxonMobil. Their economic power will be stripped from them, and these resources will become the property of society as exercised through state ownership and planning, used for the benefit of humanity. That's on day one. We work to actually create a whole new economic system and a political system, right, that backs that up. So in the Constitution for the new Socialist Republic in North America, and in the document, Principles of Socialist Sustainable Development, it lays out, and I want to briefly summarize, some of how we would immediately go to work and what it would mean to have a whole different orientation for how humanity can interact with nature and how a new socialist society will be interacting with the rest of the world and the natural world. Day one, the internationalist and planetary perspective that must guide the new society. This is very essential to what the new synthesis of communism brought forward by Bob Avakian, emphasizes. That the new economy, the new society has to be a base area to spread revolution throughout the world. We will be sharing knowledge and resources with the rest of the world. Have you heard of intellectual property rights? Pharmaceutical companies, right? Scientific inventions, even genetic matter? That will no longer exist. That knowledge will be put to the use and the benefit of humanity. And as I said, that new society, the new Socialist Republic in what is today, the United States, will be promoting and spreading revolution throughout the world. Day one, we go to work on dismantling that whole international network of sweatshops and global exploitation. An end to that. Day one, we dismantle all the U.S. military bases throughout the world. So that is lifting an incredible burden and weight off of humanity and makes it more favorable to spread and build movements for revolution throughout the world. So that is that internationalist planetary perspective, ending all those imperialist relations of domination and plunder. Second, this will be a society and economy in which there is planned and conscious economic development. Under this system, it's well, Greta Thunberg said it well at the United Nations. She said it's money and the maniacal fantasy of growth and growth and growth for its own sake. And what she's getting at is that that's the driven, what we have to bring to the table and raise her understanding and those of others. She's right. It's this, this idea of like endless, reckless growth. But that's driven by profit. But in a socialist society, growth and development will be consciously regulated. Will be consciously regulated. What we're producing, how we're producing it, how we use materials in such a way that we're not despoiling the planet. Right? And there may be some sections of the economy where you have to actually halt production because these are wasteful goods. Other sections of the economy where you have to rein in growth. Others where you want to expand. You want new housing for people. But you want that to be environmentally sustainable. So this is what it means to consciously regulate and plan growth. And part of that, and central to that, has to be an awareness of the natural limits of the world that we live in. It cannot be endless, reckless, expand for the sake of expand. We have to recognize that we live in a world of finite resources. And we have to protect that planet. And we have to repair that planet. That all has to enter into the calculations of economic planning. So that's the second point. Conscious, regulated growth. The third point is that we have to totally and profoundly overhaul the whole structure of transport, industry, and agriculture. And this is something that people can look into in the principles of socialist sustainable development. But we're going to immediately and decisively restructure away from fossil fuel production and move to replace this with renewables and environmentally sustainable forms of energy production and use. Agriculture, we have to be going at that in a wholly different way. Not that fossil fuel intensive, pollution intensive, industrialized production, but it has to be done with an eye towards the preservation of soil, water, and the ability to provide for future generations. And so too with transport. The ways in which the whole system, the grid of production and transport is set up, long distance supply chains and supply lines, which are fossil fuel intensive, this has to be completely changed. We have to develop regional economies, and that leads me to the next point, which is that we have to create a new kind of city, a sustainable city. It's a city that can produce for more of its needs, that is no longer driven by finance capital and the commercial, parasitic commercial, ways in which, buildings go up and in which resources are completely squandered. And also we see that in the response to the climate crisis and the storms that have taken place, the cities in the US, for instance, have just built and rebuilt on the same ground. And it's not a solution, and it's just a holding operation that enables finance capital to continue to maximize, its operations and activities. And we have to create a new kind of sustainable city. It's going to involve the relocation, of activities. I said the development of regional economies, no longer reliant on these global supply chains and supply lines, and also, and this can be discussed later, we have to have a society and economy that prepares for natural disaster, doesn't respond reactively to it, and responds to natural disasters not by, first of all, enforcing the diktats of private property and protection of commercial and financial and investment interests, but the needs and the welfare of people. And that requires, and this is an important lesson when we look at Sandy and Harvey and all these other natural disasters in Puerto Rico, that in the new socialist society, we will be unleashing people to act and cope with these emergencies and bringing together scientists, basic people, sharing that knowledge, right? And people working and learning from each other in coping with this kind of situation. And again, in the interest of humanity and in the interest of interacting with nature in a sustainable way. And then the fourth point, the fifth element of the principles of socialist sustainable development involve a complete repudiation of what we call the consumer society and consumerism, which is the notion that whoever has the most toys at the end of the day wins, right? And that what life is all about is to consume and consume and consume. And this is what's promoted by the capitalist system. It is the mindset, it's the ethos of, I am what I own. And this is a society of throwaway commodities. It's a society in which the convenience of those who live in the rich capitalist imperialist countries, their convenience and their ability to access the best coffees from different parts of the world, right? The best fresh fruits and vegetables from different parts of the world, completely distorting the economies of the people of the third world to serve, the interests, of the imperialist powers, and to create this kind of huge gap between the consumption and the levels of consumption in the advanced capitalist countries and the rest of the world. It has been said, you read this in your opening statement, that it would take 5 Earths to sustain the living standards of the rest of the planet on the level of the US. 5 Earths. Well, this one Earth can't even handle that, right? Doesn't have what they call the carrying capacity, the ability to provide for that in a sustainable way. So this has to be radically changed and restructured. And the last element of this principles of socialist sustainable development is that we will be imbuing everyone in society with a sense of responsibility to the planet. That the values of seeing that we are interconnected with the natural world. Human society is distinct. It is a society of social human beings. But we are completely bound up with the natural world, and we have to understand our relationship to that. We have to transform our relationship to it to make it a sustainable relationship and to build appreciation for the natural world. Well, we had a speaker here, Harriet Washington, recently, who has a book on environmental racism. And that, too, is going to be a central question of the new socialist society and economy. That not only do we have to look at the rest of the world and our responsibility in making this revolution to the rest of the world, because 2/3 of the atmospheric carbon emissions are the result of the US and Europe that are in the atmosphere. And yet the people who are suffering the most for that are the people in the third world who are facing the rising sea levels in Bangladesh. Well, we will be building awareness of our responsibility to the planet, to protect it, and also our responsibility to the rest of humanity for all the crimes that have been committed by this system. That's part of the legacy that we're going to inherit. And the last thing I want to say in response to this question is, this is our only chance. Making this revolution is our only chance to save the planet. There's no guarantee that we can do that, that we can actually succeed. But it is our only chance. And we have two things going for us. One, there is incredible scientific knowledge. There is technological potential. All of these scientists, if you pointed out, are sounding the alarm. All kinds of people in society, activists, people who live in indigenous communities who have a sense of how this climate crisis is impacting people's lives in the water systems, in the soil. There's all this suppressed knowledge. There's all this initiative that people want to take. There is that scientific knowledge. Scientists want to go to work on this. But the straitjacket, they are hemmed in, they are prevented, they are ridiculed, and now science itself is under attack by the Trump administration. And this is exacerbating this climate crisis. So the gravity of this is such that there's no guarantee that we can actually make it through this, this process of global warming that's underway. But this is the only chance that we have. And we have two things going for us. What I just described, that knowledge, that determination, on the part of broad sections of people, the technology, and we also, and very decisively, have the new synthesis of communism, which is the framework, the scientific method and approach to make a truly liberatory revolution in today's world. Right? And to create a society, and a socialist society, that people would truly want to live in, that is transformative, that is vibrant, that is addressing these incredible challenges that we are facing, and doing it on the basis of arming people with a scientific understanding of the way the world is and the way the world could be, learning from all spheres of human experience and the perspectives and the insights of others, and leading a process to remake society and to interact with the world in a sustainable way, and to be doing that in a way that's unleashing all kinds of creativity and initiative, a society that's bristling with ferment and, yes, with dissent and disagreement and great struggle over the future. But learning from all that and giving direction to all that so we can get to a world in which humanity is truly emancipated and we can interact with nature in a sustainable way.